Let's do a top 5 that are an absolute no-go zone, like a red light for sure. I'm gonna say feminists for sure. The problem with feminists is they've got a victim mindset, and if you're gonna play the victim card, then you have to have an oppressor, and the oppressor for feminists is always men. It's always a patriarchy, right? So at some point, um, push is gonna come to shove, and she's gonna side with the sisterhood, and you're just gonna be called a entitled male or entitled white male or some nonsense like that. So they're just miserable to be around. So that would be number one. The next one I would say on the list would be violent women. There should be no place in your life for women that snap. They can't control their emotions. They throw things at you. These are the kinds of women that will get you hauled away in handcuffs and in the backseat of a cruiser, even though she initiated the whole thing. They're not worth dating. They're not worth friends with benefits. They're like, just stay away from them. If you hear any stories about her being violent in her past, a good question to ask her is, "Hey, have you ever been in the backseat of a police car?" Just casual conversation. You have a date, chit chat, blah blah blah. "Hey, you ever been in the backseat of a police car?" Sort of thing. And it's funny because if they have been, they love singing like a canary, and they'll tell you the story, right? So that would be the next one. Um, Tattoos and piercings, I'm going to say, is something that some guys might have a preference for. But with everybody that I've talked to, and I've talked to a lot of doctors now, I've talked to psychologists, I've talked to sons of doctors that are product of a lineage of doctors and surgeons, and it's like these guys all make the same observation. Every woman that sort of comes into their clinic with issues, is in an ER room or any of these things. They've created the drama of their circumstances that they're in, and there's a direct correlation between the tattoos and the markings on their body and the bullshit that's going on in their life. So to me, it's a red flag. Again, I understand some guys have a preference for it. Try dating women without tattoos is one thing that I could at least recommend you trying. What is that? That's three. So the next one I'm going to give to big notch counts. You absolutely, positively cannot be in a long term relationship with a woman that shared her body with dozens and dozens of guys. It's disgusting when you think about it. The data is also very, very clear that if you marry a woman and have children with her, the chances of you having a successful marriage over a long term basis where she's committed to you and the family and the children and all these things dramatically drops with every man that she shared her body with. In fact, the number starts to go downhill after three. And three is a pretty nominal number for most women today. Because if you're in your 30s, for example, and you're dating women around your age or a little bit younger, it's not that uncommon for them to have slept with a few dozen guys, right? So there's that. And I mean, if I had to pick one more, I'm going to go with single moms. Like there's a chapter in my book where I talk about specifically why it's not a good idea to date a woman with kids. And this is coming from a man with a child, right? Like I have a daughter. There's only one circumstance, which I talk about in the book, where it might be ideal. But for the vast majority of men, it boils down to you're going to have responsibility to another man's children without any authority whatsoever. So when things don't go well, when you try to enforce boundaries, when you try to lay down the rule of the law, because trust me, you're going to be expected to pay for dinners and attend birthday parties and take them on vacations and all this kind of stuff and help little Billy zoom in the scope on his BB gun and all that sort of stuff. But if they misbehave and you try to set boundaries, the vast majority of women that bring children in tow, sometimes multiple children from multiple men, you're going to have the baby daddy drama, and you're going to have responsibility of those kids, which you're cucked in, essentially, meaning you're essentially abandoning your sexual strategy to go raise another man's kids with no authority to raise those kids. You'll be treated like an ATM. Your financial resources will be welcomed, but the boundaries that you set usually aren't. So it's like the juice is not worth the squeeze in those type of scenarios.
What would be the one case where maybe it would be okay?
Yeah, it's a good question. So if you've got a small child, so when I got divorced, my daughter was four-ish, or something like that. And one of the problem areas for women as they become adults is people aren't staying together. Generally speaking, like the best household for children to be raised in is a two-parent household. After that, it's the father raising the kids. After that, it's the mom. So men do a far better job raising kids as a single parent versus women. The data is very, very clear on that. So the problem that you can run into is if you're a dad with a daughter and you meet a woman and she's got two or three sons, for example, blood related siblings are not attracted to each other. They don't touch each other. They're not sexually attracted to each other. They're not interested whatsoever. because of Evo Psych, discovering this, that we want genetic diversity. Like, it's one of the reasons why I think teenagers become so disagreeable. Like, when their kids are very agreeable and they turn into teenagers, and then that would be around the same time that a young child 2,000 years ago, or a teen, for example, might have left the tribe and gone to another tribe. Genetic diversity. They want to leave. They want to do things on the road. They want to explore, sort of thing. And I think that's true today as well. Only, you just deal with a disagreeable teenager that doesn't want to listen to anything that you say. But the problem in a household is if you're living in a house with your daughter and she brings her sons into your house, and let's say you blend families, because that's always their idea. Oh, let's blend families. We'll just be like the Brady Bunch and live together, sort of thing. Everything will be tickety boo. I can't tell you how many women that I met when I was dating post divorce that were violated as children by either a stepfather or a step sibling in that same household. So that's a huge problem. So the only scenario where I would say for a guy like me where it might be acceptable is she's got a kid, same sex as my daughter, obviously, same age roughly, so they can be friends, they can do cool shit together and entertain each other, sort of stuff like that. And she doesn't have any of the red flags, and she's not obese, and she's attractive, and she's got genuine burning desire, like, and all these things, which is, I mean, like, we're talking about finding a pot of gold at the end of a rainbow, type of scenario. So the probability of that happening may exist, but it's pretty low. Like, I think when I was dating, there was one gal that had a kid, that had a daughter the same age as mine, and she was super attractive, but like nothing ever took off, right? So I think for the vast majority of guys, you're just better off dating women without kids. Even if you're a father with a kid, I still think you're better off dating a woman that doesn't have kids.
Yeah, it's great. There's a couple here on your list that aren't on the list, actually, that maybe I want to get your thoughts in and around. First one being dating older women. I fell into this trap, I think, in my mid to late 20s. It's like maybe things weren't going as well as I wanted to. I was having a little bit of success, but it's like, oh, this older woman, she's more secure, she's more successful, she's doing bigger things, she's into me, like, and I would latch on to these things. And I see a lot of young guys that are in their 20s fall into that way of thinking. What are your thoughts around men in their 20s dating older women?
Yeah, I see that a lot. I've had quite a few guys call in on my podcast and like, hey, I'm 27 and I'm dating this 41-year-old and she's super hot and she's a smoke show. She's got a teenage son or something like that. And it's like, and then follows, the problems that ensue. And it's like, dude, you realize you can avoid all of those problems if you don't date an older woman that's got some kid or kids, right? Like, your sexual strategy is to pass down your seed. Like, that's why you're on the earth, is to scatter your seed. And you're abandoning that to deal with a woman who's past her fertility stage. I mean, let's be honest, she's not going to give you any children. You're going to be responsible for raising some other dude's kid. And at the end of the day, you're not really able to lead a relationship if you're 27 and she's 41, right? Because she's always going to look down on you, right? She's always going to be that woman that's like, well, I got divorced 5 years ago and I got half his shit and I'm sorted. I got my money right, but I like this guy because he's young and he's hard, right? Like, that's what their angle tends to be, is I'm an older woman. I'm not getting what I want in my age range. I've already got my money because I took half of his shit when I got divorced. So I'm just going to date a young and hard guy, sort of thing. Right. And that's usually what happens. And it's a lot of sex and like enthusiastic monkey sex, and they like it. And guys are very simple, right? Like, guys are very, very easy to please. If you have an enthusiastic, generally attractive woman, they usually get like, the post-divorce breast augmentation done. So they got like the tailor-made titties going on and everything looks good, sort of thing. Like, just touch their pee-pee and they'll fall for you, right? Younger guys fall for it all the time. And it's a trap. It's the Soul Crusher 3000 is what I call it. So, try it out, have some fun if you need to, explore some options, but do not make a long-term relationship out of it. Do not marry her, because I'm telling you, like, you're 27 now, but when you're 37, she's going to be 51, and women go downhill rapidly when they hit menopause, right? And that happens for some women in their early 40s, sometimes, their early 50s, but somewhere in and around that 10 to 15 year mark, her looks are going to decline rapidly. And if we're being honest, like, a woman's value to a guy is her fertility. Can she bring him children? And there's absolutely no way you're going to get that from an older woman.
Yeah, and guys, if your looks, money, status, game are not on point, you're not in the top 20%, and you're, falling into these traps, like, pull back, get focused on you, excel, grow, chase greatness, and then you're gonna have no problem attracting the younger women.
The problem is that it's low hanging fruit. It's really, really easy, right? It's really easy for a young, 20-year-old guy to get an older chick. It's just super easy. So, they think, oh wow, this woman actually gets me. Like, she understands me and she's super attracted to me. But Becky that I dated last year, that was my age or slightly younger, she ran off with Tyrone or Chad or whatever, and I haven't seen her since. So because she's given me all this attention, I'll just look past the fact that she's older.
Yeah, yeah, she's playing you, brother. Become Chad. The other one on here, and maybe because the book was written a few years back, this might be more of an issue that's kind of rose up in the last year or two. But plastic surgery, women that have highly surgical modified faces. I'll share a story here with you, Rich, if you're okay with it. So I was at an event a couple weeks back. It was a big charity, nonprofit, kind of, high society, like the who's who of Tampa, all is in there. About 400 people showed up at the event, walked in with the woman that I was with, and instantly, one of the first things I said is, there's a plastic surgeon in Tampa that has made millions of dollars off of this room. It's all the same look. It's the high cheekbones, it's the chin, it's the nose, it's the eyes, it's the lips. I mean, it's almost a mold, and you could literally see it across the entire room. Now, later on in the evening, as the party kind of ascended, we moved on to the after party. The woman running the event, I'm close friends with her. Her dad was there, comes up to me and the woman I was there with at the event. She goes, it's so refreshing to see a beautiful woman that hasn't had her face modified and hacked up. Just your thoughts, man, around this. Like for me, that's a big, big warning sign. If you can see that there's been a massive amount of work done on her face, because I don't think that ever ends. I think once they go down that hole, it's an endless pursuit. What are your thoughts around plastic surgery in the face?
Yeah, I always find that funny because women push back so hard when I tell them that you're a beauty object to a man. Like I run this podcast now, my Unplugged Alpha podcast series called Ladies Night. I've only been doing it for a few months, and they get so bent out of shape that that their value is primarily associated to their looks and their beauty. Oh, why can't I like, why is my value just attached to that? Like, why can't you appreciate me for my degrees or my accomplishments in my career and all those things? And I tell them the same thing. There's no guy that's ever looked at your degree and been like, oh yeah, look at the degree on that girl, right? That's not what we're looking at. So to that point, women are beauty objects and they know this. They inherently know this. And anytime they tell themselves it's not true or I should be admired for more than my beauty, why do they spend all this time and money on Botox and lifters and injections and boob jobs and Spanx and push-up bras and high heels and all of these things to make themselves and dyeing their hair and the eyelash extensions and like you can go on and on and on. Women spend a vast fortune on trying to preserve, maintain, and delay the onset of gravity and time with their beauty. So I think it's an unfortunate thing because there's some genuinely attractive women that can age into their 30s, 40s, and 50s, for example, and still look very attractive without doing all that nonsense. I think some basic fundamental care, like eye cream, maybe if you get older and you want to tighten the skin back, and it doesn't look weird. Um, but like when they get to like the lip fillers where they can't laugh and they're they look like a fish or their eyebrows can't move because their forehead's frozen from all the Botox. It's not a good look, and somebody needs to tell these women the truth. You look like trash. Like it doesn't look good. Maybe there's some guys that like that. I just don't happen to be one of them.
Yeah. Richard, this is something I spend a lot of time on because, my world is kind of engulfed in the pornography addiction space. And when you talk about supernormal stimulus, there's a great study that was done in Stanford with the butterfly ecosystem where they injected these fake butterflies that had bigger wings, brighter color, eyes and whatnot. And the male butterflies stopped going to the female butterflies to mate. They started going to the artificial ones. I see what's happening in society. Maybe this is my skewed perception because I've spent so much time talking with men that are wrapped up in pornography, that what women are doing is a byproduct of men being overly not sexualized, but overly stimulated through just an endless stream of women after women after women. I mean, like I've heard Jordan Peterson talk about this, that a 12-year-old boy today in a span of 5 or 10 minutes can look at, consume, and watch more naked women than a king would have done, 100 years ago. So I think that what women are doing, because women follow men, right? Like men are becoming more attracted to these fake things. You have cartoon porn, you have all that's kind of, the BBW and all these other things. I see this is what's happening because men are weak and we're getting caught up in that. But that's just my perception around these things. But it's not attractive to me at all. And it's once you see it, it's like you can't unsee it. And like I said, I've seen so many women that they'll start with the nose, but then it's the cheeks, and then it's the jaw, and then it's the lips, and then it's the eyes. And it's like, because every time they change something, they're not liking the person that they're seeing back. So it becomes this endless, almost facial body dysmorphia type of life.
Yeah, there's a book by Maxwell Maltz called Psycho-Cybernetics, and he was into rhinoplasty. This book's old; it's decades old, and he's talking about in the book how he noticed that even after doing like facial reconstructive surgery for guys that were in like burn victims or anything like this, no matter how good the results, how perfect they looked after the fact, their mind's eye, like the vision they held of themselves, was still the deformed look that they always had, right? So I think that's just one of the flaws, with human thinking. Um, I honestly like I get why women do it, and I see the industry exists, and there's a lot of push to encourage and endorse that. And I mean, some self care is good. Like I want a woman to look fit and feminine, and I get, look, hey, maybe time and gravity haven't been good, and you want to get a breast augmentation. Fine. I mean, but when it gets to the point where it's like, she walks in the room and her tits enter the room like 3 seconds before the rest of her because they're so big, then it kind of gets exaggerated, right? Like, like take care of yourself, but don't go so far that it looks obnoxious. And I don't know, maybe some women, the way that guys to some degree get addicted to porn and like going down the rabbit hole or whatever that looks like, women might get, addicted to the notion of like facial, surgeries and lifts and Botoxes and injectors and all these sorts of things. And fine. It's just, I want you to eat. You're just not going to eat at my table.